We love our sports in Chicago. And we'd rather be here in Soldier Field or Wrigley or Sox Park or at the United Center or Wintrust, cheering on our players and having a good time with our friends. But as we know, this crisis has changed almost everything, and particularly our sports. Coming to these parks now would be dangerous and deadly to ourselves and to our city. That's why I'm proud to be joining Chicago sports teams to launch our new campaign, We're Not Playing. They're not playing, and neither are we. Thanks to their support, we'll be leveraging their vast network to drill down on the message of stay home and save lives, here in Chicago and across our state. As we saw from the growing numbers over the weekend, this virus is truly deadly. It continues to spread, and no one is immune. No matter how frustrating it may be at times, we all need to continue staying home and saving lives. And it's particularly true now as the weather starts to warm. Even if you aren't sick or showing symptoms, you could be carrying the disease and spreading it to others, all of which is dangerous. This crisis has been hard on all of us. And that very much includes our sports teams, who've had to completely shut down their operations in order to keep us safe. This has not only impacted the lives of the athletes and the front office personnel, but the countless vendors, ticket handlers, custodians, maintenance crews, and others whose livelihoods are based on having tens of thousands of fans packing our stadiums every day. That's why I want to commend the team leaders who have announced their plans to continue supporting these employees despite games being canceled. It's these kinds of actions that will allow our city to get through this crisis and get back on track as quickly as possible. We have to really thank all of them for being leaders and being great Chicagoans in this time of need. While we're here, I also want to take this opportunity to announce that the man who spearheaded the We're Not Playing campaign, Michael Fastnock, is joining World Business Chicago as Chicago's Chief Marketing Officer. In addition to this campaign, he's wasted no time in already making his mark on our recent Stay Home, Save Lives campaign around town and on social media. And that's in addition to the previous pro bono work he's done for the city of Chicago, including the rebranding of the Chicago Public Library and its foundation, and most recently, our campaign around the 2020 census. But the role of Chief Marketing Officer goes far beyond that. We see a tiny pinprick of light at the end of the tunnel. And in the coming weeks and months, Michael will be leading our efforts in developing a unified citywide approach to marketing so we can recover from this pandemic. And that, in addition to marketing and branding and a business development strategy to showcase Chicago and attract tourism, talent, and corporations back to the greatest city in the world. And all of this will support our broader aim of driving inclusive growth across Chicago's communities. At World Business Chicago, Michael will be working alongside city departments and Choose Chicago to elevate our city's operations and bolster our profile at every level, conveying to our external partners what we already know, that Chicago is the best place in the world to live, work, do business, visit, and raise a family. And that's obviously on top of being the best sports town in America. All of this is saying something we'll be needing now more than ever as we work to recover from the COVID-19 crisis and repair the enormous economic losses and job setbacks that have touched truly every part of our city. Folks, as we can plainly see, we must all be in this together. And while we're still far from the end of this crisis, we will get through this by staying together and come out stronger than ever because of the efforts that we have been taking over these many weeks and what we will do going forward. I want to give my deep and heartfelt thanks once again to all the Chicagoans who have been stepping up in big ways and small to support each other. Just today, the McDonald's Corporation that moved back into the city of Chicago several years ago stepped up in a major way and donated 750 N95 masks to the city of Chicago and another portion to the state of Illinois. That, friends, is true civic leadership. Thank you to McDonald's. And we also have to continue thanking and holding in our prayers and doing everything that we can support our healthcare workers, our frontline city workers, and of course, our valiant first responders. Those have been setting up the alternative care facilities and sites like McCormick Place, delivering food to our families and seniors and CPS students, and doing so much more every single day to make sure that this city is strong and vibrant, even in this very difficult time. We owe them a debt of thanks now and forever. And before I step away, I want to show you a preview of what's to come from your favorite sports teams beginning this week. Can we play the Jumbotron?
Hey Chicago, if you haven't noticed, we are not playing, and you shouldn't be either.
We're stuck in the house, and so are you guys, but it's okay.
As much as you want to see us play, and as much as we want to play for you, we need your help to get back on the court.
Do your part to slow the spread of COVID-19.
Pon de tu parte para frenar la propagación del COVID-19.
Stay at home, stay safe, stay alive, and stop the spread of COVID-19.
It would mean the world for the folks who are risking their lives for us.
Let's do our part, let's stick together, let's stay home and help save lives.
Quédate en casa para salvar vidas.
Thank you. Happy to take any questions that you have. Yes, sir.
You mentioned this in your comments. Oh, God, scared me there. You mentioned this in your comments about as the weather warms. Yesterday was a nice day. There were still several people out in parks. Is there going to be anything else that the police will do to address the congregation of people in parks?
Well, we're going to keep stepping up our enforcement efforts. By and large, the vast majority of people have been complying, but we know that the parks continue to be an attraction. And I want to be clear, it's not that people are going out, although we want people to really stay home. The issue is congregating, and that's what we can't tolerate. So when we see that, the police have been very aggressive in issuing dispersal orders, citations were necessary, and luckily we've only had a small number of arrests, but people have to understand, yes, it's a beautiful day, the weather's getting warmer, but we need people to continue to comply.
Mayor, COVID-19 has hit the African-American community particularly hard. 70% of Chicagoans who've died of COVID-19 are African-American, 58% countywide. I wonder if you could share your thoughts on that and what can be done to drive down those numbers.
Well, we're going to be holding a press conference a little later today at 1 o'clock to specifically address it. But it's devastating to see those numbers and knowing that they're not just numbers, they're lives. There's families and communities that have been shattered. That's why we will be announcing a very robust and immediate comprehensive plan to address this. But we also have to think about this in the context of really what the Chicago Department of Public Health has been saying now for years. We have equity and health access disparities all across our city, and particularly in Black and brown neighborhoods. We know the problems of diabetes, of heart disease, of respiratory illness are really prevalent in communities of Black and brown folks. We know that access to health care is a similar challenge in a lot of those communities. And so this disease that is just ruthless in the way that it attacks, that is why we've been saying from day one, the vulnerable population, seniors, 60 years and older, and even more acute at older ages, people with underlying conditions. They are the very vulnerable populations that we've been talking about since the onset of this pandemic, and with good reason, because we knew that they were going to be the ones that were most at risk. And unfortunately, the data has proved that out. Now, I'll say more about this later, but this is something that is a public health red alarm that we have to make sure that we are stepping up as a community to address it. And we're going to be activating every part of the Black and brown communities, from the faith community to elected officials to neighborhood organizations, and of course, the network of health providers, not just the hospitals, but also the doctors, the insurance companies. This is something that we have to tackle as a community. Now, we're not going to be able to erase decades of health disparities in a few days or a week, but we have to impress upon people in these communities that there are things that they can do, there are tools at their disposal that they can do to help themselves, but we have to call this out as it is and make sure that we've got a very robust, multi-tiered response now and going forward, and we will.
Are there populations you feel like you're going to be able to access by leveraging athletes to communicate with them? And how do you kind of measure success with that goal that you have communicate with those people?
Look, this is all about making sure that we can educate people, and particularly educate people in compliance about the stay-at-home order. And obviously, athletes have amazing cachet. I remember over NBA weekend, I was in a group of young people, and there were some veteran NBA players that I knew from back in the day, Muggsy Bogues and other folks, and there was a group of, teenagers that were there, and we're kind of like, all right, I've kind of maybe heard that name, but the minute Zach LaVine walked in the room, it was like the light had shined brightly. So we know that in thinking about the Stay Home, Save Lives campaign, we've got to use multi-mini campaigns and a lot of different tools so we're reaching every segment of our population. As I've said more over and over again, this is a disease that doesn't discriminate. It really doesn't. And young people, I remember back in the day thinking nothing could stop me, that I was invincible. And so we can get credible messengers like sports athletes who can really reach sports fans, but also young people in particular. That's why we're activating this group of people, because we know that they have cachet, we know that they have reach, and having them on board, I can't be more grateful, because I think it is going to have an enormous benefit and end up saving lives.
On-topic question from Bill Cameron. Is it time for teams to play with no fans in the stands?
Well, look, I think we're not at that point yet. But I know that the various sports leagues are talking about a variety of different options, depending on how long the public health personnel believe that we need to be reducing the size of crowds. We're here in beautiful and iconic Soldier Field to really mark the fact that this has affected the sports teams. The NBA immediately canceled its remaining season when we saw that a couple of NBA players were tested positive for the virus. And then every other sports league really followed suit. On March 21st, we were supposed to be celebrating the home opener of the Chicago Fire. This has had a profound effect on who we are as a people. We are a great sports town. We have tremendous sports fans, not only here in Chicago, but across the U.S. and the world that follow our teams because they are good and strong. But this has also obviously had a dramatic effect on the athletes and the other people that really come together to make sure that sporting events in this city have a reach that's really beyond a lot of other businesses. So the economic impact alone is pretty profound.
Last two questions from Charlie Mayerson. Is the city tracking reports of tenants evicted for failure to pay rent or the expiration of leases for which they've been unable to find suitable replacement housing? What is the city's latest counsel for those that are displaced?
Well, what we did initially at the end of March, in advance of the April 1 rent date, is we set up a fund, $2 million, that we've now pushed out to people to help them pay their rent. So that's in place. We're looking at round 2. I have to give thanks to the United Way and the Chicago Community Trust, who are also pushing out resources to not-for-profit organizations and their employees to help them really address the economic crisis. We're in conversation with people at the state level about what we can do to stop evictions in Chicago and Cook County. Our sheriff has said no evictions will be enforced for 30 days, and I've consistently been calling upon mortgage holders and landlords to make sure that they are giving people grace in this really difficult time. We set up the Small Business Resiliency Fund to make sure that we could put money in payrolls and help small businesses be able to pay their workers, so that the ripple effect that happens when you're out of work and you don't have a job doesn't create, or we at least put some steps in to mitigate the economic devastation that too many people are worried about and some are suffering and experiencing.
And last question, also from Charlie Mayerson. San Francisco has moved to shut down almost all of its mass transit. Under what circumstances should or would Chicago and the CTA consider doing the same? Well, our CTA is a vibrant part of our community life, and the people that are going to work, the healthcare workers, first responders, the frontline workers who don't have the option but are essential to making sure that city services are vibrant, but also our healthcare system is vibrant. The people who are feeding our children in CPS, those folks ride the CTA. So shutting down the CTA would have a ripple effect in all the negative ways in the areas of our city that we need to stay strong, particularly our healthcare system. So I don't see a circumstance where we are going to shut down the CTA. I also don't see a circumstance where we're going to substantially cut services unless that's absolutely essential, because if we cut services, what does that mean? That means that people are going to be crowding the buses and the trains even more because they don't have as many options. So this is something that we're looking at. Dorval Carter, the president of CTA, is in weekly conversations with systems across the country and looking at best practices and the things that they're experiencing. But our folks really rely upon the CTA, and we've got to make sure that we're there for them. Thank you all. Thank you.